to today's Committee of the Whole, and we have one item on the agenda, and I'll turn it over to you, Christy, to get us kicked off. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President O'Halloran. Good evening, Council members. Thank you for having us this evening. I'm Christy Rowland, the Deputy CAO, and I'll be joined with Carrie Roller, our Finance Director, Amanda Free, Assistant Director of Economic Development, and our Senior Attorney, Shane Maloney. We are here in response to your request for information about the most recent wage ordinances passed in our neighboring cities. We will be bringing forward just information we have gathered through research, outreach, and data collection. Carrie will be sharing the unique aspects of each minimum wage ordinance and the impact to each city. Amanda will follow Carrie with a report on her outreach efforts to businesses and touch on our employment data and demographics. I will chime in a little bit on our business survey that we have done. And finally, Carrie will close out the discussion with some preliminary theoretical analysis on the impact of adopting something similar to our neighbors. And Shane is on hand for any questions as well. One just last important note, we are not bringing a proposal or recommendation. This is information. There are so many variables to the various cities that it will take some teasing out and some thought to move in any direction, if any. So just information, no recommendation, no opinion, really. So with that, we know no two are the same, and we're going to have Carrie help walk us through each one of them. Thank you.
Everyone. Just to compare the two cities, SeaTac and Tukwila side by side, they're both very different. City of SeaTac only applies to a very small subset of businesses, the hotels and the transportation agency industry. So hotels that have more than 100 rooms and over 30 employees, so large hotels, and also anybody that's working at the airport. This would not only be those that work for the airlines, but anything that supports the airport, such as rental car, shuttle, transportation, etc. Right now, the City of SeaTac does not have any reporting requirement, so businesses are just on their honor system. They have just support and information to support if asked, but they're not required to submit anything to the city. The port currently does all of their outreach and their communication to the businesses that this is impacted on. And so right now the City of SeaTac does not have any additional staff that handles the administration of their minimum wage laws. The City of Tukwila is a little bit more complex. It's a little bit more layered. This has employers that have at least 15 employees worldwide, so not just within City of Tukwila, but worldwide, or has annual gross revenues of over $2 million in the City of Tukwila. Then it further layers it down to large employers, so more than 500 employees globally would pay the higher rate, and a mid-size employer of 15 to 500 employees globally would have a lower minimum wage rate of $16.99 that will be phased in, adding $1 per year to eventually phase that lower rate out in the future. Tips are not included in the calculation of that hourly rate. And the other requirement for the City of Tukwila is that offering additional hours to any part-time employees first before adding any additional staff would be required. Right now, City of Tukwila is a fairly new program. They actually, it goes into effect on July 1st, so this Saturday. They currently have added one FTE right now for the outreach and communication. They do have a requirement every year for businesses to certify annually that they are complying with the minimum wage laws. Right now, just following up with the city, they're not quite sure how many staff they will need in the future. They've added one right now with understanding that they probably will need to add quite a bit more in the future. And they're not quite sure who will be doing that and what department will be following up with that. We also just added, as one of the slide decks, a comparison to Seattle as well. It's another neighboring city that has something more similar like Tukwila. Again, they have a higher rate of $18.69 for those businesses that are larger businesses, so over 500 employees. And then any business that has less than 500 employees that do not receive another form of compensation like tips or healthcare benefits would also have the higher rate of the 1869. Seattle also has a different twist that for those employers that are less than 500 employees, but that do get another form of compensation like healthcare or tips, they could pay the smaller base wage of $16.50 as long as the combined amount of the $16.50 plus any tips they earn plus the value of the healthcare benefits all combined equal the larger amount of $18.69. So a little bit more complexities there. This will also, that lower amount will also be phased out into the future by 2025. The city of Seattle has one full department devoted to administering the minimum wage laws at the city. They have 36 staff members that are assigned to this department. The city of Seattle, like SeaTac, does not have a formal reporting compliance mechanism. They are just asking businesses to have numerous documents on hand. They have a checklist of the required documents that they need to have to be able to supply to city staff if asked to support the minimum wage that they're paying. So as you can see, amongst the three cities, very different programs and different requirements. Turn it off to you, Amanda.
Thank you. So I spoke to some businesses, and I just want to give some information on the business impact from our meetings with them and also some of the data that we have. So approximately 76% are full-time employees in this, are employees in the city of Renton, and 24% are part-time, and this is based off the recent census. So in our business interviews, we just wanted to kind of touch on a minimum wage and the part-time part with the businesses. Kind of heard the same theme from all of them, which is also we've heard from some of our partner organizations that are speaking to the businesses as well. So there were 7 points. The first one was business owners believe in fair pay, but they're challenged to find skilled workers, and they need the ability to determine the pay for their employees. Number 2, most of them are already paying close to $19 an hour just to find the quality people and the reliable ones. So the $19 or however the minimum wage works out, they're already paying higher than the required minimum wage for Washington. Number 3, most of them indicated that the added expenses would be passed along to their customers. So that prices for childcare or services and food would be raised and passed along to those using the services. The fourth one was a lot of the employees are from various cities. So the impact is not helping the Renton residents, it's just helping those that work within the city of Renton with the higher wage. Number 5, part-time is really essential for a lot of businesses to operate and function, especially your weekend crowds or your nighttime events or even those larger events when you just need to add staff to help accommodate those events. Having a full-time staff or having part-time and having to offer full-time could be a challenge for some of them, as the part-time is very beneficial to and essential to their business. The other conversation that came up was the bookkeeping and the human resources would be an added expense for a lot of the businesses because most of them are pretty small, and that resource would be impacted to have to comply and make all of the reporting necessary. And the 7th one was a lot of the businesses indicated that they would have to look at potentially leaving the city to avoid this perceived extra work and the resources if this was to move forward. So this data is from 2019, so it's a little older, but so the latest one we had was the census data breaks it out from 40,000 above and below. So this kind of gives a count of the total jobs and the ages and the types of jobs where it's the 40,000 and below and then 40,000 and above. As you can see, some of the retail and the healthcare were the ones that were in the lower ranks, but not for all of them. We would, as this is 2019, we would assume that this, if there was current data, we would assume it would be higher wages given just the current conditions of trying to find jobs and people. And the other one that I didn't have a slide on, but found impactful, that the city of Renton has 63,563 workers. Only 6,000 of them, 6,005 live in Renton and work in Renton. So there's 57,000 plus that come to Renton to work every day, and there's 44,000, almost 45,000 that leave Renton to find employment. So it was kind of it heard the same theme through a lot of the businesses, and just one, yeah.
So a lot of what I found in our survey, which I'll share with you, actually kind of is validated by what Amanda found. You might recall we sent you a notice that we sent out a survey to our businesses. We sent a direct email. We had a third party operate this survey, so it was very hands-off. At this point, we've gotten 140 responses, so it's a pretty small response. But from that, we are seeing, again, what we're hearing from Amanda. So there's some, as we know, data is just one piece of information among the bigger pictures. So I'm going to share a little bit about that. The general takeaway is that the most impacted groups are, of course, the smaller businesses who just can't absorb the extra work, the extra cost, and have a limited, smaller profit margin. The top businesses that were responding to our survey were our salons and dry cleaner businesses, healthcare, social assistants, accountants, law offices, and then hospitality, hotel and restaurants. So those were our top number of responses of the survey, so of the 140. When we asked, would a locally imposed minimum wage impact your business? Just straight out, 39% said yes, of course. It's not a surprise. 48% said no. Again, getting back to that, we're already kind of paying above our minimum or above. Hospitality said 100% yes, which is not too surprising. And then the healthcare and social assistance were the next highest impacted at 50%. Of those impacted, 47% said this would negatively impact their decision to continue operating in Renton. So again, correlating with what Amanda heard. One notable item, again, correlated by Amanda's interviews, the regulation for the administration, the cost, the overhead, small business is going to be hit harder. And of those who said they have employees doing work in Renton and other cities, 53% said that the reporting requirements would impact their ability to do business in Renton. So again, correlating with what we heard. When we asked, would a part-time hiring regulation impact your business, there's a three-way split. So there's not an even it was just shy of a third said negatively, just shy of a third said not at all, and just shy said doesn't need to apply. 9% said positively. So that's just a few. Never did hit double digits on any of the positive impacts in any of the questions we had. Of our 4 top businesses, none of them said it would have, the group I mentioned earlier, none of them said it would have a positive impact, and over half of them said it would have negative consequences. And of those impacted, 55% said it would impact their decision negatively to continue in Renton. So again, just a reminder, this is just one piece of data, one piece of information. Correlate that with what you're hearing over here, with the face-to-face interviews, and all the different variables. It's a lot of information to take in. The survey is still live, so if anything dramatically shifts, we can let you know. But I think we're about where we're going to be with that. So with that, turn it back to Carrie.
The overall impacts, possible impacts to the city if we implement a program such as this, really the overall impact's hard to say depending on the overall model that we adopt. As we saw earlier, that we had 3 different cities that had 3 very different models. And so something like Tukwila, CTAC with no regular reporting requirements and really a narrowly defined eligible businesses that would need to comply, it would be fairly easy to administer. Whereas Tukwila, their program is a little bit more complicated and had some annual reporting requirements and does apply to all the businesses within Tukwila. That would be more significant to the city to administer. Right, like I said, Tukwila just started, and so we're yet to see the overall impact to them. And so it'll be interesting to kind of watch to see how they adapt to these new laws. But if we do look at the Tequila model, just for discussion purposes, how would that impact the city, and what would we need to have here as our staff to be able to help administer this program? I'm anticipating that we could need about 5 FTEs to be able to administer a program such as this. We need to make sure that we have sufficient outreach and communication. It's really important when we're adding complexities to a new law. When we implemented the B&O tax back in 2016, we had extensive research or outreach and communication. And to this day, 7 years later, we still continue to have a lot of questions. We have quarterly outreach events to help business maneuver the B&O tax law. So I anticipate that there will need quite a bit of outreach and communication. We also would need someone to help monitor the compliance. The city does not currently have staff on hand that specializes in enforcement of labor laws. We would need staff to develop an enforcement process that would allow for civil relief for complaining employees if that was brought forward. And also there could be an increase in legal fees that could be fairly significant depending on what that looks like. We'd also anticipate there would be some software needs and other overhead to administer any new program. So anytime the city is looking at adding a new program, from the finance side, we always look, how are we going to pay for this new program? And so we look at, is there a revenue source to be able to support a program? In this case, there isn't. And so the revenue source to be able to support a program like this would be two. Either we raise taxes, property taxes that the residents would support, business taxes for the businesses, or we could look at current programs that we have on hand here at the city and make some decisions about, is there a program that we want to cut and shift some of that revenue that we're using for that program to administer this program. All that to say, 5 FTEs and some of the overhead that I'm talking about, I expect to cost anywhere between $1 to $2 million per year for the city. So when the economic impact, really the economic benefits and drawbacks to businesses is really hard to say, and there's debates for pros and cons on both sides. Many debate and say, higher salaries could argue that it gives people more disposable income to be able to spend within the city, which would increase sales to our businesses. Others can say higher salaries would indicate businesses need to increase their prices. This could really impact those businesses that have a really small profit margin where they just cannot absorb an increase in wages. Increasing their prices could be a good thing. They generate more revenue, but it also could be a negative side where a consumer may say, you know what, I can buy that good or service somewhere else for a cheaper price, so I'm going to. Some employers may look at reducing some of their workforce and outsourcing some of their workforce to another location if they are not able to absorb some of these higher wages. And lastly, I really think in the last 10 years, our economy has been very, very strong. And right now, we're kind of at a really weird time in the economy that it's just a lot of things are going on that are different than what we've seen in the past. We have high inflation, high interest rates, and very, very low unemployment. And so it's really hard to say how a change such as minimum wage laws for our businesses really could impact, just with the economy being in such a sensitive flux right now. It's just very different than what we've seen over history. For Renton specifically, we really want to continue to be mindful of how this impacts our businesses. We want our businesses to thrive in our community. Our businesses support our general fund revenues by almost 60%. 47% comes from sales taxes and B&O taxes to support our general fund, and the other 13% comes from utility taxes. So any decisions that we make to our businesses could potentially impact our general fund revenues as well. Business taxes are not insulated by the economy like property taxes are, so we really want to be mindful as any any changes that could positively impact our businesses would impact us as well, or negative impact us. And then, like I'd said, more overhead costs to administer the program. We would be needing to look at possibly increasing taxes to administer the program, or looking at programs to cut to be able to fund that. So that's a lot of information, and looking to you if you have any questions for any of us.
Sure.
Oh, I'm sorry. So you're done with your information sharing?
shared all the information we have right now with you, but we can always find more.
Wanted to make sure that before we jumped in. Yes,
Okay.
Councilman.
So she said any questions, I'll just jump in. So I'm not going to even mince words about this. I think this is an extremely bad idea. For even before I got some of the additional stuff. But the one thing that stands out to me is the 6,000 people live in Renton of 65,000 jobs. So the whole premise is, well, let's raise the minimum wage for the 6,000 people living in Renton. And, well, those other people, they can go and spend their money back in their city. If anybody thinks that they're going to, before they leave, before they go to work, well, let me buy some stuff here. I think that is a major fallacy. My question is that there's many things I'm worried about with this, but do we know of any? I know of one business, large business, that said they likely would leave. It sounds like there's quite a few. Any idea what this would do, even if you're speculating, to the tax base? I mean, as far as, 60% of the taxes, that's significant. And anybody voting for this, if they don't think that their taxes are going to go up at some point, then they're too caught up in the emotional aspect. Do we have any idea about just tax-wise, if you just had to I don't know, speculate?
It really depends on the type of business. So we have businesses that generate sales taxes, which is significant for the city. And then we also have other businesses that don't generate sales tax, but do pay B&O tax. And then we have some businesses that are below the B&O tax threshold that don't contribute to the B&O tax, and based on what they sell might not be contributing to the sales taxes as well. So it really depends. With 60% of our general fund revenues coming from our businesses, that was one of the things during the pandemic. We were really cognizant of our businesses, what was impacting our business, the decisions we were making at the time, because, our saying was really the businesses are our lifeblood of our city. We've decided as a city to keep our property taxes very low, which is different from other cities. We've been very, very careful about what we've been increasing for our residents. And so any impact to the businesses could be significant for our general fund. Specifically, one business leaving over another, it's hard for me to say until we look at which businesses are those.
Fair enough. I'll leave it at that for now. Let my blood pressure go down.
Thank you for this great presentation. I really appreciate it. My only wish that I could have seen more of the responses, all the numbers. I was trying to actively type all the yeses and noses so I could kind of process them. So forgive me. So in terms of the question of businesses that would be impacted by the raise of minimum wage, how many said they wouldn't be impacted? I caught that number very briefly, but I just wanted to confirm it.
39%
They would not be impacted.
would be.
They would be. How many said they would?
48 said no.
48%
Yes.
said no.
Said no.
Okay. And then my other question, was this only for business owners?
We use the business licensing database. So all registered businesses within Renton, we got that from finance. So yes.
In my understanding, no workers were given a survey.
It went to their business email.
Got it.
So there's a chance that could be in there.
Oh, okay. Great. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Again, also appreciate the presentation. My question is kind of coming from the angle of cost of living, since I know that's something that we talked about here. Do we have any analysis that shows what the living wage is within the city of Renton? Keeping in mind, I know some folks are coming from elsewhere, but to know, and I know that could range. So let's say we took a household that was 2 incomes with 2 kids, and I'd like to see variations of that potentially too, to know what exactly the wage, the take-home wage would need to be in order to afford housing and basic, food, all those things you would expect to be normal expenses that we factor in. I know when we look at cost burden households, we have a formula for that, for what we consider cost burdened as in terms of percentage of their income that they spend on their rent or mortgage. Because the question, what I'm wondering from that, if we have that data available, would be how many of those residents that or those workers that are coming from outside the city to work would choose to live in the city if they could afford to live in the city? And that would be what I'd be curious to see the nexus there.
I don't have that information.
I didn't expect you had it offhand, but it was a thought I wanted to pose for
Yeah, that's a really good question.
discussion.
We'll get that information.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Christy, I know that you didn't ask this question, but I will be interested to know from the small business that are going to be, that say that they're going to be impacted, how many of them are minority-owned businesses?
Very anonymous, and we do have the data within our business license database, but whether or not we did not individually give a unique questionnaire.
I do understand.
Yeah.
I do understand. Thank you.
But a deeper dive in the future, sure.
Thank you.
Councilmember Vaughn?
Madam Chair. I have several questions, but I know we're just allowing one so far. So the 7 points that you've mentioned in terms of the criteria of asking all the questions, would you be able to share that? Because I don't think it was in the. I was just trying to take notes. I don't think it was in the packet.
The highlights, or I can
Okay.
provide them either way. But the number one was the business owners. The ones that I spoke to really do believe in fair pay, but they do want the ability to decide on wages for their staff. Number two is most of them are already paying close to $19 an hour or higher to find the reliable, qualified people. Three was passing along the added expenses to the customers and clients. Four was the employees come from various cities and not necessarily Renton residents. Five was part-time is super essential to business, to some of the businesses. And hit and highlight, sorry. Six was bookkeeping, and the human resources would be an added expense and resource for them. And then seven was they indicated that they would leave to avoid the perceived extra work and resources for Renton specific.
So that, if I can have a follow-up question, because I just want to clarify first. Yeah. Okay, thank you. So my follow-up questions is, in terms of the 130 responses that we have, they're all business owners, correct?
Yes, that's who we. Yes.
Councilmember Vaughn, is this a follow-up question or is this another question?
Let's follow up to the points of HR, but that's okay. Is that
Okay, proceed.
okay? Yeah. So when we're talking about HR resources, did any of the business indicated that they have software system or HR kind of, management? Just wanted to know, and I'm curious about
Yeah,
that.
my conversations where the businesses were different than the survey results, and I don't even know if they responded to the survey. I spoke to some small businesses that most of them try to do everything themselves, so they didn't necessarily have the HR or the payroll division. It was them as a business owner doing the work themselves, so it would be added onto their duties.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Again, great presentation. Thank you for the information. I wanted to follow back up on the question that Councilmember Perez asked. Do we keep the information of the minority business owners that we have in the city of Renton? Is that information that we have? Do we know who small minority business owners are, just based on business license?
When they renew their business license, there is a question that is asked if you're minority, women-owned, or small disadvantaged business, but it's not a required answer. What we found is some people got nervous about answering that, and so they can choose to answer, but it's not required.
Okay, so
we
we
do
have
some data.
so incomplete data, but we have some. Okay, thank you.
So, do we know when CTAC adopted their minimum wage?
I believe it was 2014, but it looked like there was some Supreme Court ruling that was eventually in the beginning of 2015. So sometime in 2014 or 2015. And then Seattle was April of 2015.
The reason I ask is I did a little research over the weekend, and CTAC has had the highest local minimum wage rates for many, many years in the state. They also have the highest poverty for many, many years in the state. And I think that has to do with who lives where and who works where. And I think that's what I'm hearing you say, that the high minimum wage, highest in the state in SeaTac, has not contributed to lowering their residential property rates. And that concerns me. So I just wanted to share that out. Yes.
May I clarify something that was just brought? Their minimum wage only impacts hospitality and transportation, right? So that maybe because it's not across, I guess we're comparing apples and we are comparing different cities. It's not apples and oranges. It's maybe like a green apple versus a red apple versus, different types of apples. But maybe I would offer to perhaps the alternative is because it's not across the board, it's not hitting some of the most marginalized, impoverished individuals. Could that also be a possibility per the logic that was just provided?
There's any number of variables. I would
Exactly.
assume. Yeah.
Yeah.
Madam
Yes.
Chair. So I'm trying to gather. So I feel like all these questions are certainly valid, but I feel like we're kind of dancing around trying to find the reason to justify or something. I mean, there's a saying that says, when you hear hooves, think horses and not zebras. And the data that you gave is concerning to the point that it will, for the impact that it has on the people who actually live here. I personally, I don't think that an additional $4 an hour for those whatever is going to cost anybody to be able to afford rent and move here, but that's just my opinion. Carrie, with your expertise, can I just ask a plain, simple question? The cost to the city, in your opinion, will either taxes likely go up in some kind of way if all this stuff comes to fruition?
Yes,
Okay.
because we would need to pay to administer the program.
Okay. That's all I need.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I think along the same question I just had written, and I wanted to correct the information if it's not corrected, that it's 1 million to 2 million per year to administer the program, given 5 FTE. Is that what I heard earlier? So in the case that when we look at SeaTac, Tukwila, and Seattle, in the magnitude that this program is, we have to have 5 FTE, or could it be have you looked at any other scenario and options, or it's just kind of because of our residents? Because we're looking at the 65,000 versus the whole 107,000 residents, right?
So I'm really basing that off of a couple things. So City of Seattle has 36 staff members to administer their program. I know that we're not Seattle, but 36 staff members to administer their program without a reporting requirement is pretty significant. I'm also basing that off of what it takes to administer our B&O tax program. So we have 3 staff members right now for our B&O tax program, and we could use more. I also feel like something new, we would need an outreach or communications person to be able to answer a lot of the questions. When we implemented the B&O tax, we could not keep up with the outreach and communication at that time. And then what I'm seeing also from City of Seattle is that they have a legal person to be able to help with overall policy and compliance as things come up. And so that was just kind of my estimate on just based on looking at City of Seattle and what we're taking to administer our program. Tukwila, when I spoke with them, they just have one, but the finance director said they anticipate needing to come back to ask for additional FTEs. They're just getting started.
So I'm hearing a big fear is an exodus of businesses possibly leaving if the minimum rate minimum wage was to be raised. Say that 3 times fast. Was there any knowing that that came up as a theme, was there any information gathered, data gathered around possible businesses that left either Seattle, Technical can't really look at, there's no data to look at yet, but Seattle or SeaTac over the last 10 years? That would be of interest to me.
Yeah, I just met with the businesses last week, so it's been, I'm trying to pull this together quickly for you guys. But
Thank you.
that is something we can look at to see if they have any experience or stories to go with what they've seen as trends with those cities.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Anybody else? Anybody else? Okay, Kim.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question in regarding to the survey and the timeline. If you could please refresh my memory in terms of what was the time frame in that for folks to be able to do the submission, and was it also in language if that was an option?
It was opened up on June 12th. It was advertised through a message from the mayor on the same day, and languages were not an option. It's still open and live right now.
Until
It's still open right now.
until when will it be closed? Or?
We'll probably call it at some point when we stop getting responses in. They're just trickling in, so.
To that, Christy, will we send out like a last call for comments before we close that?
We can make one more push and see if we get anything dramatically different. Our last push was mid last week, and I think it only garnered about 10 more responses. So the people who are going to do it have probably done it.
Yes, Councilmember Vaughn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess my concern here is, and perhaps it's because it's a system, so the way we had to use it, but just the access of information, who can access to the survey, and the outreach that we've done. So with 130 businesses, I don't know if that's a good sample.
And
right?
that's,
And
yes,
so
exactly. That's why it's got to be taken as a whole. And
Yeah.
I would not say it's anything to base a decision on. It's just to support any anecdotal information, which I think we have correlated a lot of what we heard.
Okay, thank you very much for the work on pulling this together so quickly. I know that you guys really scrambled, and I really, really appreciate that. And as always, impressed but not surprised by the quality of the presentation. So, and with that, I thank you again, and we are adjourned.